Hi, Mrs. Chauffeur. My name is Christiane Carlisle, and I'm going to do the presentation portion of my assignment, and I'm going to be talking about the writing ELOs of my assignment of To Kill a Mockingbird. I am going to talk about mostly all of the questions and just the most important ones to me. So I'm going to start out with the summary. Scout Jem and Atticus live in Macomb, Alabama in the South. Jem is 10, dreaming of playing football. Scout is a 6-year-old smart tomboy trying to keep up with her older brother. And Atticus is a successful lawyer raising 2 children with a respected Negro cook, Calpurnia. The kid's best friend, Dill, from Mississippi, who spends the summers visiting his aunt who lives down the street. The 3 play games, act out stories, and get into some trouble sneaking into the mysterious Radley yard. Strange things such as the mended pants, the gifts in the tree, etc. Atticus tries to encourage the children to be kind and to see things from other people's perspective. Being the respected, established lawyer that Atticus was, he took the case involving Tom Robinson. Tom Robinson is a black man being accused of raping Mayella Ewell, a young white woman. Bob Ewell is the clearly guilty party, as Atticus provides clear evidence in the courtroom that would be impossible for Tom Robinson to do. The racist white community, including the 12 jurors, convict Tom Robinson. Even though Atticus is successful in providing impressive evidence, the judge knows it, the sheriff knows it, and all the black community and Atticus' children know it from the second balcony in the courtroom. He is innocent, but proven guilty by a southern courtroom. Tom Robinson supposedly tries to escape the jail and is killed. Following the verdict and the embarrassing evidence, Bob Ewell is determined to get revenge. As Jem and Scout are returning from the Halloween pageant at school late one evening in the dark woods, there is a surprise attack. Boo Radley quietly intervenes to help the kids escape. Scout runs to get help as Jem is stuck in the struggle with a broken arm. Boo carries Jem home safely. As the doctor leaves and the chaos dies down, Boo appears and gets to meet and visit with Scout. Meanwhile, the sheriff and Atticus are both agreeing that Bob Ewell, the attacker, fell on his own knife. Scout and Boo's relationship begins as she clearly sees Boo's innocence, much like that of a mockingbird. The next ELO that I will be discussing is how Harper Lee begins the book. Harper Lee begins To Kill a Mockingbird by providing us with a lot of background information. Scout, who's the narrator, begins to explain what led her to her brother's broken arm. She then provides us with numerous amounts of information on her family history. She goes into depth about Simon Finch, who was a fur trader and a part of The next ELO that I'll be discussing is how Harper Lee begins the book To Kill a Mockingbird. Harper Lee begins To Kill a Mockingbird by providing us with a lot of background information. Scout, who is the narrator, begins to explain what led to her brother's broken arm. She then provides us with numerous amounts of information on her family history. She goes into depth about Simon Finch, who was a fur trader and an apothecary. He provided their family a very successful farm on the Alabama River. This farm supported the family for many years. That leads us to Scout's dad, who's Atticus Finch, who lived successfully off the farm and became a high-level lawyer. Scout goes on to enlighten the audience about how her mom died when she was 2, and how they have an African-American cook named Calpurnia who helps raise the children because there is no mother figure in the household. The next part of this is how she ends the book. So Harper Lee ends To Kill a Mockingbird in a very intelligent way. She connects all of her points and lessons throughout the book at the very end. It was a very creative ending and truly made the reader open his or her eyes at the end of the book. The book ends with Scout and Jem walking home late at night from a school pageant. They continuously hear noises behind them, but never think they are in any type of serious danger. until they look back and see their attacker, who is Bob Ewell, running after them. He attempted to stab Scout, but her costume provided her safety. Jem tried his best to help, but he ended up with a broken arm and a bump on his head. Suddenly, the wrestling stops and their attacker is put to rest. Their savior carried Jem home and Scout trailed from behind. When they arrived home, the doctor and sheriff had been called immediately, and Scout soon realized that their hero was Boo Radley. Scout proceeds to take Boo upstairs to say goodnight to Jem and walk him back home safely. This ending connects all the author's points by showing to never judge anyone by their appearance or your first thought of them if you don't know who they truly are. Scout puts Boo's life into perspective and learns she should never have judged him. She realizes that Boo was never going to harm her, but he actually was always looking out for her. The next ELO I will be discussing is the use of rhetoric she uses in the novel To Kill a Mockingbird. So throughout the book, Harper Lee uses all three types of rhetoric very well. While writing the speech that Atticus Finch uses to persuade the jury of Tom Robinson's innocence, she shows us how strong her rhetorical writing is. Atticus's speech demonstrates his values and morals as a person. Not many white men would have taken the case to support a black man, but Atticus Finch did. He tries to convey the jurors with a sense of duty to take the high road and realize Tom Robinson is an equal, and he should not be treated differently based off the color of his skin. So now I'm going to be reading off some of the most important quotes that I think were in Atticus Finch's speech and determine if they're either ethos, pathos, and logos, and why. So here's the first quote. Our courts have their faults, as does any human institution. But in this country, our courts are great levelers, and in our courts, all men are created equal. So this quote is very strong and powerful, and I believe it's ethos. So in the book, Atticus uses words like honorable and great because it demonstrates the code of equality in the courts and how these rules should always be mandated no matter what, basically saying it doesn't matter if you're black or white, all men are created equal, we should all be treated the same. So the next quote is, a quiet, respectable, humble Negro who had the abnegated temerity to feel sorry for a white woman has had to put his word against two white peoples. So this quote to me is pathos. He's using pathos to make the audience feel bad for Tom, but the bigger picture is to show the audience that they all share pity for Mayella. They all feel bad for her, so they're all the same. They're not segregated. You don't have to be segregated. And the last quote is, there is a circumstantial evidence to indicate that Mayella Ewell was beaten savagely by someone who led almost exclusively with his left. And Tom Robinson now sits before you, having taken the oath with the only good hand he possesses, his right hand. Now this is very important, and this is logos. Atticus provides facts that should end the case. He proves to the audience that this offense could not have happened by Tom Robinson because he doesn't have a left hand. Tom didn't have the hand to hurt Mayella, and this fact makes it very convincing to everyone, the judge, the audience, the jurors, that he did not commit this crime. The next ELO that I'll be discussing is the tone of the book. So I believe that the author's tone changes throughout the novel about twice. So the tone is very different at the beginning of the novel than it is at the end. So the book starts out with a very innocent tone. Scout, the narrator, talks about her growing up in a small southern town, and she does many innocent things for the first time. For instance, she talks about her seeing snow, her first experience at school, and a couple quotes that show her innocence and naive and just a little child is when she asks these questions. So, for instance, she asks her Uncle Jack, "What's a whore lady?" And she asks her father, "What exactly is a nigger lover? And what's rape?" So she asks these questions and she's being so innocent. She doesn't know how bad these things are and she shouldn't be talking about it. She's just curious. She's just a curious little girl that wants to know more things and she doesn't really know what's going on. But at the end of the novel, it focuses more on the trial of Tom Robinson, and I think the tone changes to more of a serious manner. So when the trial happens, Scout's tone is more realistic and really down to earth. She has less dialogue than normal during the trial, and an example of her maturity is when they're sitting upstairs with all the African Americans during the trial, and she says, "Even the babies were still, and I suddenly wondered if they had been smothered at their mother's breasts." So you can tell how much she's grown, and she can tell how serious the trial is and how everyone's handling it. Nobody's talking, they're just listening because that's how serious of a matter it is. And I think her tone changes throughout the book because she realizes that too. She's not just like asking what's wrong. She knows, and she's really grown up. And then the last thing that I'm going to be talking about is what I learned from reading To Kill a Mockingbird. So this was actually, it turned out to be one of my favorite books that I've read, just because you learn a lot, and after you finish reading it, you're like, wow, like, things were different, and it's amazing to see what people went through, and as sad as it is, but it's just amazing to see, like, what you take for granted, and you need to appreciate what you have just more than ever. So I think the main things that I've learned were to never judge a book by its cover, to treat everyone with equality, and to stand up for what is right. I think at the end, how Scout always judged Boo, always thought he was the scariest man. She realized at the end, when he saved her life, to never judge him, that he's actually a very nice person and would do anything to save her. And obviously treat everyone with equality. Tom Robinson didn't commit the crime. He was just an innocent, nice man who was going to help Mayella out. But he got accused of this crime and he ended up dying. So I think it's a huge lesson to always treat everyone with equality. And the last one is to stand up for what is right. I think that Atticus is the main person for this one because a white man usually would never stand up for a black man back then. And by him doing this, he just stood up for what is right. He knew that Tom Robinson didn't do it, and he was going to do everything in his power to serve him justice. And the African Americans were so thankful and grateful for him. And he just didn't care because he was always going to do what was right. And I think that's something that you should also always follow. If your friends are doing something and you don't think it's right, don't follow them. Do what you think is right and do the right thing. Atticus showed a lot of perseverance in the situation, and he never gave up on Tom Robinson. I will use these three things every day in my life, and always be generous to others. I'm never going to treat people unfairly, and I'm always going to fight what I believe in. And yeah, so this book was very informative, loved reading it, and I got a lot of life lessons out of it.